Joe, welcome back to the Manufacturing Millennial Manufacturing Happy Hour Combo podcast. It's good to have you here. You kicked us off at AMRL last year in 2021. You were our first interview. So I think the only appropriate question to start our interview with, Joe, what have you seen change in the past year? If you reflect on October 2021 and where we are now, what have you seen change and how have you seen it impact, let's say, the robotics industry?
A great question, and certainly, as I said before, it's a very dynamic time in our industry anyway. It seems like every aspect of the technology is changing rapidly. Related to we'll say the AMR type platforms, a big difference. It was talked about actually the keynote today. Vision's having more and more of an impact. The technology of the vision, 2D, 3D, and how it can impact going to non-structured environments. And this whole idea that we talked about the last time, if you remember a year ago, although I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember that discussion. We talked about how this is a disruptive technology. It's really going to places we couldn't. And adding in this technology of the real advancement of the vision and what it means to be able to manipulate these devices and putting robots on platforms like it was talked about earlier this morning at a keynote, and how vision is having the positive impact to be able to go in those different environments. I even mentioned, I think last time, about agricultural environments.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really inconsistent environment. So having vision, I'll say the human aspect of being able to control whatever that device is through using that technology is really a positive impact of what that technology will mean going forward.
Yep. And you have a lot of roles in our industry. You've been the president of the National Federation of Robotics. You're part of a lot of A3 boards. But let's talk about what you're doing for your day job. You're the VP at Calvary Robotics. And I think one of the exciting things is you guys have grown 100 employees since the beginning of this year. So basically since we talked last year. Where do you see a lot of that growth? Is that engineers? Is that, what's the growth that we're seeing as a lot of custom machine builders and systems integrators happening right now?
Great question. Thanks. You're right. Calvary, its group, Calvary Robotics, has grown pretty rapidly. A lot of that's driving that, and it's across all the sectors, by the way. So certainly we're adding on the front end of the business and the application side, the sales side, to be in front of customers more and help. But there's more customers, more sectors that are looking for automation technologies. If you think about what's gone on post-COVID, a lot of people didn't come back into the workforce. They stayed home with their families if they could, is one. Certainly there was a big stretch of the population, a big part of the population that retired. In fact, I think 50%, statistically, more than 50% over the last 2 years more retired, didn't come back into the workforce. So it's really putting a lot of companies in a position where if they want to make product and they can't get the people, then they need to look at automation technologies. So that's helping us as a company have opportunities that we didn't see in the past. And in order to do that, we need more let's say, shoulders to carry the load to be able to bring more automation solutions. And again, it's everywhere. It's controls engineering, it's electrical engineering, it's the mechanical engineering, all of the aspects of our business. In fact, we've recently added a second internal recruiter to our business, just help to bring people into our, add more people to our staff.
One other thing that you mentioned last year, I'm like, it's all coming back from our conversation last year. One of your takeaways from the event was, hey, companies need to hire more technologists within their organization. And that was, I don't know if you've seen that at Calvary or out in the field, but are you seeing more of that? And if you haven't seen it yet, that's okay. But I'm just curious if that's a trend where you've seen or if you think we'll see more of soon.
Well, so what I do see as a trend to try to support that maybe is more and more people are doing internships and even some apprenticeship programs.
Oh, okay.
And part of that program strategy is to get people kind of cross-trained, that cross-pollination of technologies. So this summer we brought on several people from universities, and we had them work in various departments. So they get exposure to those various departments. So it's giving them a taste of that. And then when they go back to school for their senior or junior year, they know, okay, these are the areas that I want to get more understanding of. So when I go out to the marketplace, I'll be more valuable because they see that they're value to us.
No, that's fantastic. So one other thing is, with a lot of people who are listening to this podcast or watching the video online, and they want to say, hey, there's a lot of automation happening, but I just don't know where to start in my process or within their manufacturing facility. You talked about Calvary is growing on all these different industries. Where should people start to first understand where their best, I guess you could say, lowest hanging fruit is in a manufacturing facility?
That's a great question, and often it's the thing that makes you successful and not successful. Typically, and too often, when people look at their first time of automation, they look at their manufacturing and try to, oh, here's the most difficult task. If I can automate this, I can really
do
automate
anything.
everything. And that's really not the great way to start. You've probably heard me say before, it's almost like taking your teenager and saying, okay, I'm going to put you behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler to teach you how to drive. You wouldn't start in that direction. So it's the same kind of thing. So I would say reach out to an integrator or maybe even a local distributor and have them come and look at your operation, kind of get some advice on where those low-hanging fruit. I'm not sure low-hanging because you don't want to make it the easiest thing necessarily, but something you can bring some value to and that technology already exists. Don't try to develop new technology for an application. Try to start with something so you can learn the technology, understand how to use the technology, and then expand on it. So, again, something a little bit more, I'll say, success-oriented to start out, and then also make sure you get the staff and support going forward to make sure that continues to be successful. Because once the integrator leaves or once the partner leaves, you want that system to be productive continually, right?
Last question before we wrap up. So we started the conversation with, between last year and now, what's your prediction for the next year, right? There's some uncertainty ahead of us. I'm a big believer in, controlling the things you can. Where are you going to be focused over the next year?
Well, uncertainty, if you mean by from a financial perspective or the economy, first, I don't get really overly concerned about that type of thing because recessions, except for the Great Recession, recessions typically last about 9-10 months.
Yeah.
Most companies we work with, their vision is much longer than that. They're not making products for next year and only next year. So they're looking at that. So investments for them from that perspective, I think will continue. I'm not really in fear of that. I think that going back to the technology changes, I think this particular part of the industry is going to continue to have tremendous positive impact for us. And as we talked about, the Boston Dynamics keynotes talked about more and more of the interface, interoperability across those platforms. That's really where the future is going to be. Customers are pushing that. They want equipment to talk to each other.
Yeah.
So not just the platforms and not just the robot to the platform, but the robot to the platform, to the CNC machine, to the PLCs, et cetera. So that's going to be the big push going forward. Is it next year? Maybe not, but it's in the future, and I think it's going to be pushed by the customers.
And I think we touched on that very briefly at last year in Memphis. I think Aaron on stage talked about companies who pursue interoperability are going to be the most successful long term, and I think now we're really beginning to feel that push from the end users saying, if you're not going to play nice with everyone else, you're not going to play with us.
Right, exactly. And those will be the ones that will take the market share. So, again, thank you, gentlemen, for inviting me to join me today. Great questions. I appreciate it. Always great seeing you. And thanks for the little plug for Calvary Robotics. We appreciate that, too.
We look forward to having you back to kick us off in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a deal. Put
Thanks,
me on your
everyone.
calendar.
Cheers.
We'll see you.